Rosindell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I commend my right honourable friend, the member for Croydon South, for what has been today a robust defence of the right of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee of this Parliament of the United Kingdom to carry out an inquiry into a subject it has every reason and right to examine. The shameful actions by the government of the People's Republic of China to deny our committee the ability to visit Hong Kong to conduct our legitimate business is a demonstration to the entire world that China has little respect for freedom, free speech or democracy. It is a sad state of affairs that will have grave implications for British-Chinese relations for a very long time to come. Mr. Speaker, I first visited Hong Kong in 1996, at the time when Lord Patton was the governor of the Crown Colony. It was indeed then one of Her Majesty's Crown colonies. The people of Hong Kong, of course, did not choose to have that status taken from them. It was imposed upon them without their consent. And unlike the people of the Falkland Islands, who 2 years earlier, in 1982, had their right to freedom and self-determination upheld by Her Majesty's government, although in very different circumstances, it can be denied that the people of Hong Kong were not accorded those same rights. Today, 30 years later, the streets of Hong Kong are filled with young people who, understandably, demand freedom and democracy, basic rights that the People's Republic of China continue to deny them. The Sino-British Joint Declaration made expectations very clear between the United Kingdom and the People's Republic of China regarding the sovereignty and the way that Hong Kong should be governed. And I am deeply saddened that over recent weeks and months, the assurances given to Her Majesty's government at that time have been forced into question by the actions of Beijing. Over the past 3 decades, Britain and China have enjoyed a growing partnership in which trade and bilateral relations have been strengthened. Yet the behaviour of China this week is wholly inconsistent with the positive diplomatic trend that has been observed by our two nations since 1984. It is, Mr. Speaker, nothing short of an outrage that the Foreign Affairs Committee of this democratic House of Commons, the mother of parliaments, should be treated in such a way by an undemocratic Chinese government. I am gravely concerned, Mr. Speaker, about this aggressive and confrontational position taken by China over a matter of such importance. There is no place in the 21st century for an attitude of this nature. It is not only unjustified, an unjustified attack on elected British parliamentarians, but it is an attack on transparency and democracy itself. Mr. Speaker, what exactly is China trying to hide from us? It is the right of the Foreign Affairs Committee to carry out an inquiry into relations with Hong Kong and to formulate this report. It is beyond question that it is within the gift of the British Foreign Affairs Committee to examine not only British-Hong Kong relations, but also the adherence to the joint declaration itself. As a joint signatory, of course, we must have the right to look at whether that agreement is being upheld, both in the letter and the spirit of the accord. And, Mr. Speaker, by denying the committee the right to visit Hong Kong does not close the door on this issue at all, in perhaps the way China may have hoped. In fact, it has brought it to the world's attention. Foreign Affairs Committee will not back down. We still intend to visit Hong Kong, and our inquiry continues. By their actions, what China has achieved is actually to raise many serious questions in the eyes of this House and indeed the British people, questions that must now be answered, and the British government, I believe, must show no hesitation in demanding an immediate response. And I ask the Minister of State to tell this House, will he insist that the Chinese ambassador be called to the Foreign Office to explain his government's actions? I certainly hope he will be. Mr. Speaker, as has been stated by many of my colleagues this afternoon, Britain has no interest in interfering in the internal politics of China. But Hong Kong is different. Britain has a duty to the people of Hong Kong, and we must not abandon them. The United Kingdom owes an allegiance to the people of Hong Kong, many of whom served bravely in Her Majesty's armed forces. And it is imperative that we do not back down from such an important commitment to them. Still today, there are many former Hong Kong servicemen who live within the territory of Hong Kong, and they are seeking British citizenship. These are people who have fought and have prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice for this country, people whom we should care deeply for their well-being and status. These are servicemen from the Hong Kong Military Service Corps and the Hong Kong Royal Naval Service who did not receive a UK passport following the handover of Hong Kong to China. These men and their ancestors have served British commitments in Southeast Asia greatly, stood shoulder to shoulder with Britain through 2 world wars, as well as alongside Britain in France, Burma, Korea, Malaya, Singapore, Hong Kong and China, and they've served the United Kingdom, King, Queen, Empire, Commonwealth and country over all these years. And the British government must surely now recognise that the decision not to give all of those servicemen a right to British nationality was unjust and an error of judgment that should now be rectified. I had hoped that the Foreign Affairs Select Committee could meet some of these loyal ex-servicemen whilst we were in Hong Kong, but alas, that will now not happen. And the actions of the Chinese government have, in my view, highlighted why Her Majesty's government should now be prepared to offer all of those Hong Kong ex-servicemen the right to a British passport. I put it directly to the Minister today. Will Her Majesty's government now urgently review their policy on this issue? Moreover, Mr. Speaker, I am of the belief that we are at a crossroads. We are in a position where serious decisions must be taken. Britain has to decide whether we tolerate and simply accept China's behaviour, or whether we demonstrate that we are prepared to fundamentally reconsider what has up until now been a positive bilateral relationship that we share with China. The Home Secretary recently announced 25,000 visas would be given free to Chinese nationals. Of course, we must strengthen and embolden links between Britain and China, but it is now clear that China has the ability to behave in an irrational and confrontational manner. So special arrangements such as this must now surely be brought into question. Alternatively, China could, even at this stage, draw back from the brink, accept that Hong Kong is different, and allow the people of that territory the right to make their own choices about their own future. It must be made clear that China cannot take British cooperation for granted. Britain is a strong nation. We have the 6th largest economy in the world. Our trade with China is largely one-sided, and so we must not be afraid to stand firm for our national interests and the interests of those people who were part of our British family and whom we have pledged to support, simply in fear of potential trade repercussions. Britain, Mr. Speaker, cannot and will not be bullied. If China is not prepared to honour the spirit of the 1984 Joint Declaration, then Britain will have no choice but to conclude that the hand of friendship and trust that Margaret Thatcher held out to China 30 years ago has been betrayed.
Mr. Keith Vaz.
Mr. Speaker, it is a pleasure to